In just 3 years, BYD went from selling 400,000 cars to over 3 million, crushed Tesla in China, and built its own ships and insurance company to keep scaling faster. How did a battery startup from the 90s end up running the global EV game? In 1995, nobody could have guessed that a humble battery chemist named Wang Chuanfu would become the man leading one of the most powerful electric vehicle companies on Earth. BYD started as a tiny battery shop in China, making packs for mobile phones. Not glamorous, but reliable. And that's exactly how Wang operated. Quiet, efficient, always watching. While the rest of the world chased flash, he chased function. Then came his boldest move, buying a dead car company in 2003. No one could understand why a battery guy would step into a crumbling automotive factory with broken machinery and no real future. But Wang wasn't after cars. He was after control. He knew the battery was the heart of any electric vehicle. And if BYD could control both the heart and the body, they could change the rules. That gamble launched BYD Auto. And while their first attempt was a disaster so bad Wang personally destroyed the prototype, he didn't stop. They came back with the F3, a near carbon copy of the Toyota Corolla, but half the price. Sales exploded. Accusations of copying followed. Wang didn't flinch. He wasn't building to impress. He was building to dominate. In the years that followed, Wang set his sights on electric vehicles before anyone else took them seriously. He said BYD would be #1 in China by 2015 and global by 2025, and nobody believed him. But while the others laughed, BYD built. Not just cars, but battery plants, ships, semiconductors, and even their own EV insurance company. In just 3 years, they leaped from 400,000 cars sold to over 3 million. Back in 1995, BYD didn't look anything like the EV giant it is today. It was just a modest battery company trying to survive in one of the most crowded industries in China. The founder, Wang Chuanfu, was a chemist by training and a problem solver by nature. He started BYD with a clear goal: to make better, cheaper batteries. Not flashy, not revolutionary, just reliable battery packs for things like mobile phones. That's how it began, not with speed or horsepower, but with ions and volts. But then came the first major plot twist. In 2003, Wang did something no one saw coming. He bought a bankrupt state-owned carmaker called Zhan Qinhuan Automobile. It was a forgotten company with outdated machinery and a fading license to manufacture cars. That license, however, was pure gold. In China, getting approval to produce cars isn't easy. It takes years of regulation, paperwork, and connections. But Zhan Qinhuan already had one, and Wang saw it as a shortcut straight into the automotive world. The deal cost him 269 million Hong Kong dollars and raised more than a few eyebrows. His own shareholders were confused and borderline furious. Why would a successful battery company jump into the car business, especially with a factory on life support? But Wang wasn't chasing cars for the sake of building them. He had a bigger plan. He believed that electric vehicles were the future, and BYD already had the most expensive and complicated part figured out: the battery. Owning a car company meant they could pair their battery tech with vehicle design and move faster than anyone else in the game. Most people thought it was crazy, but Wang wasn't looking for overnight success. He was playing the long game. With the accusation came the skeleton of an automotive operation: basic tooling, a dusty production line, and a small team of workers. But more importantly, it came with a foothold. BYD Auto was born not from a boardroom vision or a billion-dollar investment, but from an ambitious chemist taking a risk most wouldn't dare. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and it marked the beginning of one of the wildest and most unexpected transformations the auto industry has ever seen. BYD's first attempt at making a car was, to put it nicely, a disaster. Internally known as the 316, this prototype was so poorly designed that dealers literally refused to take it. They didn't just dislike it, they were embarrassed to be seen with it. One look at the 316 and you'd think it was built during a blackout. The body lines were awkward, the fit and finish looked like a high school shop project, and nobody could figure out how it made it past the design phase. Wang Chuanfu didn't argue. He personally ordered the prototype to be destroyed. Not redesigned, not recycled, just straight up smashed. That moment set a tone for BYD that still exists today. Brutal honesty over blind pride. With the 316 buried, the company went back to the drawing board. What they came up with next was the BYD F3, And this time, they hit something big. It looked nearly identical to a Toyota Corolla, down to the headlights and grille. But while the Corolla had the backing of a global brand, the F3 came with a price tag almost half as much. In a market like China, where price often outweighs prestige, that was a game changer. People didn't care if it was original. They just wanted something that worked and didn't drain their wallet. And the F3 delivered. Sales exploded. In its first year, the F3 moved over 63,000 units. Just 20 months after launch, they were celebrating their 100,000th car rolling off the line. For a company that had never made a vehicle 2 years earlier, those numbers were wild. It wasn't just about quantity either. The F3 had decent reliability and performance for its class. That made it more than a fluke. It was BYD's official entry into the mainstream. BYD's rise in the early 2000s didn't come without controversy. As the F3 sedan gained popularity, people started noticing something odd. It looked way too familiar. From a distance, it could easily pass for a Toyota Corolla. And it wasn't just the F3. The F0 looked like the Toyota Aygo. The F6 gave serious Honda Accord vibes. Critics were quick to accuse BYD of copy-pasting their way into the market. Industry insiders called it reverse engineering, and some were not amused. US trade officials even raised concerns, suggesting that BYD's rapid progress was coming at the cost of intellectual property rights. But BYD had a comeback ready. Their defense was simple. None of what they were using was patented. In Wang Chunfu's eyes, it wasn't theft, it was efficient adaptation. Why spend millions on designing something from scratch when you can take a proven idea, tweak it slightly, and sell it for cheaper? That logic might sound a bit shady, but it worked. BYD wasn't targeting wealthy buyers looking for luxury. They were serving the everyday customer, someone who just wanted a dependable car at a price they could actually afford. And in a fast-developing country like China, that was a massive opportunity. This so-called copycat strategy turned BYD into a household name. In less than a decade, they went from outsiders to one of the top players in China's domestic auto scene. Their cars were everywhere. Smaller cities, larger cities, state-run fleets. BYD had carved out space in nearly every market segment. People didn't care much about originality. They cared about getting from point A to point B without breaking the bank. BYD offered just that, with some added tech perks thrown in. Critics continued to throw shade, but the results spoke for themselves. While other car makers were busy guarding their patents or chasing high-end customers, BYD was quietly building market share. They understood something many didn't at the time. In a market flooded with first-time car buyers, price and reliability beat out prestige and brand loyalty. Whether they were playing dirty or playing smart is still debated, but one thing is certain. They were playing to win. And in a country that was just beginning to fall in love with cars, that gave BYD a serious head start. By 2006, BYD had already proved it could compete in China's budget car market. But Wang Chunfu wasn't interested in just being another automaker. He saw where the world was heading. Gasoline cars had run the show for a century, but the future was electric. While most global car companies were still tinkering with hybrid prototypes or dismissing EVs as unrealistic, BYD was going all in. That same year, they launched the Electric Vehicle Research Institute, a division dedicated solely to new energy vehicles. This wasn't a side project or a PR stunt. It was the beginning of BYD's biggest gamble yet. Then in 2008, Wang made a bold statement that stunned the industry. He said BYD would become China's top automaker by 2015 and conquer the global market by 2025. Most people rolled their eyes. After all, BYD was still seen by many as the budget brand that copied designs. But the company wasn't just making noise. At the Geneva Motor Show that same year, they unveiled the F3DM, the world's first mass-produced plug-in hybrid. It was a direct challenge to the likes of Toyota and GM, showing that BYD wasn't afraid to go head-to-head with giants. The F3DM could run on battery power alone for short distances and switch to gasoline for longer trips. Technologically, it was impressive, but in terms of sales, it struggled. The market wasn't quite ready and the price was too high for the average consumer. Plus, charging infrastructure was still in its infancy. Even after the Chinese government began offering EV subsidies in 2010, the F3DM only managed to sell a few hundred units. It was a breakthrough that nobody noticed, at least not yet. International expansion didn't go smoothly either. In 2009, BYD brought the all-electric E6 to the North American Auto Show. It had a promising 400-kilometer range and looked like a legitimate competitor. But once again, the rollout fell flat. Instead of selling to everyday consumers, BYD shifted focus to fleet operators, offering the E6 as a taxi or shuttle. It was a smart pivot, but it didn't create the buzz they hoped for. In 2008, something happened that completely changed the way the world looked at BYD. Warren Buffett, the man who built an empire by betting on companies with long-term vision, made a move that stunned the auto industry. Through his company Berkshire Hathaway, Buffett bought a 10% stake in BYD for about $230 million. Just like that, a Chinese battery company turned carmaker, previously seen by many as a knockoff brand, was suddenly being vouched for by one of the smartest investors on the planet. It wasn't just about the money, it was the stamp of credibility. Buffett didn't invest in hype, he invested in potential, and that meant BYD had it. With that newfound attention, BYD started to act even bolder. Instead of simply trying to play catch-up with traditional automakers, it went full throttle into the electric vehicle space. One of the first big moves was the development of the K9 electric bus. It wasn't flashy, but it was powerful. An electric bus that could travel over 300 kilometers on a single charge. That made it incredibly appealing to cities looking for cleaner, more cost-effective public transport. Soon enough, BYD was rolling out electric buses all over China, and eventually into global cities like Los Angeles, London, and Santiago. Rather than fighting for showroom space in wealthy neighborhoods, BYD was putting its vehicles on the streets every single day. Around the same time, BYD joined hands with Daimler AG, the German giant behind Mercedes-Benz. The two formed a joint venture called Denza, aimed at building electric cars tailored specifically for the Chinese market. It was a big deal. A respected European carmaker teaming up with a rising Chinese brand showed just how seriously the world had started taking BYD. The first Denza concept car came out in 2012, and while it didn't rock the market, the partnership itself symbolized a new era. BYD was no longer seen as just a local company. It was now part of the global auto conversation. Behind the scenes, BYD also became a regular name in international forums and industry events focused on clean energy and sustainable transportation. Governments, NGOs, and private companies began including BYD in strategic discussions about electrification. Whether it was urban mobility, green infrastructure, or battery innovation, BYD was showing up with real data, proven products, and a rapidly growing presence. The Buffett investment gave them the platform. But what BYD did with that spotlight was even more impressive. It moved quickly, forming alliances, building electric buses, investing in R&D, and setting its sights not just on cars, but on an entire ecosystem of mobility solutions. It was clear that BYD didn't want to be the best EV maker in China. It wanted to shape the global transition to electric transport. And it wasn't waiting for anyone's permission to do it. After years of rapid growth and high-profile moves, BYD hit a rough patch around 2010. It was the kind of moment that tests whether a company can truly survive beyond its hype. Riding high on early success, BYD made the classic mistake of scaling too fast. Dealerships were popping up everywhere. The company went on an aggressive expansion spree, trying to dominate every corner of the Chinese market at once. But they didn't have the infrastructure, model variety, or brand maturity to support that kind of explosion. The cracks started to show quickly. Dealers began pulling out in infrastructure. There were complaints about delayed shipments, inconsistent vehicle quality, and underwhelming after-sales service. Customers were returning vehicles or just walking away altogether. While BYD was obsessed with hitting big production numbers, it had overlooked the thing that actually matters long-term: product experience. Cars were being pushed out of factories at breakneck speed, but the quality just wasn't keeping up. That hurt the brand, especially in bigger cities where buyers expected more. The numbers confirmed the chaos. In 2010, BYD set a goal of selling 800,000 cars. They didn't even come close. They barely crossed 500,000. It was a sobering moment. Government subsidies were still propping up parts of the EV market, but even those couldn't hide the structural problems inside BYD. Critics said the company had run before it could walk, and for the first time, BYD had to admit they weren't completely wrong. The leadership knew something had to change. Instead of chasing volume, BYD began shifting gears. They started focusing on quality control, tightening dealership operations, and revamping the customer experience. The strategy was simple: less chaos, more consistency. At the same time, they put renewed energy into branding. Until that point, BYD was seen more as a cheap alternative than a trusted automotive brand. Fixing that image required effort, from advertising to customer service to dealer support. The goal was to rebuild trust. The crisis also forced BYD to reevaluate its product lineup. Some models were cut, others were redesigned, and newer electric offerings began to take priority. They couldn't afford another flop like the F3DM. BYD needed cars that weren't just affordable. They needed to be desirable. So while the years between 2010 and 2012 were tough, they were also critical. They marked the end of BYD's reckless growth phase and the beginning of a more calculated, mature approach. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.